Welcome to Sacred Conversations, a place where Dr. Nicole Dolan and I, Robin Bethel, along with a myriad of guests, explore some of the sacred threads and wholeness of life, held within the light and within the dark, held within the immensity. Thank you for being with us. In this episode, as Nicole and I talk of concluding Season 1 of Sacred Conversations and taking a break from recording the podcast, we share what creative directions we're currently opening into more deeply. We also touch on what else has been meeting us in this moment, which for both of us feels like a time where something has been completed and, too, something still waits to be born. Nicole and I have loved sharing these conversations with you, and we'd love if you keep in touch. You can find our contact info in the show notes, and we hope you enjoy this last offering of the season. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Robin.
Today, Nicole and I are coming together for a conversation that is kind of free-flowing and just touching into, what we're feeling right now and energies around us and different things, but also a little bit different because we are going to make this our last episode of Season 1, and then we're going to take a pause. The length of that we can't say right now, and what it will look like after that we also can't say exactly. So this episode, we kind of want to touch into notes that we may be feeling, in conjunction with that, just like the cycle of energy that we're in. And yeah. So I guess that's how I'll start us out. That's kind of where we're meeting today, in that place. Do you want to share first about kind of what's meeting you in that like energetic swirl, or do you want me to?
I can share. I just kind of have to drop in here and feel into what feels most present. So I think when we discussed taking a pause, for me, I'm always resistant to change at first. I'm always like, and it's kind of funny because I'm also equally an incredibly spontaneous and impulsive person, like to a fault
Mm.
sometimes. So I have both of those energies running through me. But one of the things that I always do whenever something changes, whenever a door's closing or temporarily closing or just a change is coming, one of the things that I will always do is first really lean into and feel my feelings around it, right? But then hold space for, okay, well, whenever we, close one door, another door opens. And I know that's a saying that most of us are familiar with, but it's also, I really align with it energetically, right? Like whenever we kind of close something that has been taking a certain amount of energy, then there is a certain amount of energy available somewhere else. So, what that looks like for me, a couple of things that we've discussed. So, we've talked about a new podcast that I'm going to be starting, and I can share a little bit more about that. So, for anyone that doesn't know, in my years as a therapist, a psychologist, I've also been a clinical director and supervisor of therapists. So that basically means I've taught many therapists how to do therapy. But it also means that therapists who are working to get licensed typically work, well, always work, depending on what state they're in, for a certain amount of time underneath a supervisor's license. So I have been in the role of clinical supervisor for many years where I have helped many people get licensed through teaching them and them working under my license. And then eventually my nonprofit grew to a place where we had other directors and supervisors as well. And so, something that came to me in actually a recent meditation, probably a couple months ago, was this real feeling, this real movement around like, holy shit, you've kind of forgot about like your therapists. You've kind of forgot about this group of people who I naturally have been in service to for a great period of time. So when I really sat with that, I talked to a couple colleagues and felt into, how cool it would be to actually talk about how to do therapy, how we do therapy, because we actually practice in such a different way, something that I've really shared here. I think maybe we haven't talked about it so much here, Robin, but I feel like overall, through all of the processes that we have shared about like growth and transformation, it can feel really clear to someone listening now to probably really hear like that as a therapist, I practice in a very different way. I hold deep meaning in all things, as I know you do too. And I hold things like trauma and adversarial experiences as meaningful too. Now, we never rush into the meaning of them. It's important to feel our feelings around them as well. Well, not even as well. It's first and foremost important for us to feel and experience, you know, what the impact of these experiences is. But I also hold ways in which I help people thread meaning through these experiences. And I always hold at the core the question, what does the soul want? So when these things are happening in our lives, when we're going through something really difficult or our lives are in chaos, like I've shared mine has been, I really come to the root of like, well, what does the soul want? How is this part of the journey of the soul? And that's not typical in the therapy realm. It's not something that we are taught, and often we're advised against, don't go there. So I've always loved being kind of a sacred rebel in my work, and I'm excited to go back into bridging that gap and working with therapists again. So this will be a podcast for therapists and or healers, advocates, but also I love the idea of anyone who's really just doing their deeper work and who's interested in speaking about it from the place or hearing about it from the place of the process of transformation, maybe having a little bit more of that guidance and clinical awareness and background of what is actually happening in that process. So, we intend to share our own stories, as I've often done here, because I really believe that it's so important for us to really show up as ourselves and do our own work if we're going to be in the seat of helping others, helping them facilitate and also activate their own inner healer. It takes a great amount of work for us to do on ourselves in order to be able to help others. And then, of course, it will be helpful to people too who are journeying in the depths of their own healing work. So I'm really, really excited about it. It was something that was kind of on the horizon, but certainly since we decided to take a pause, it was okay, this is something that I have space and time for. And it's going to be called The Purple Couch. So come and check us out there. I'm going to be hosting myself, but I will have guests. I'm going to hopefully get therapists to write in and send me questions so we can do some real live, looking at real life situations of what people are dealing with. And something that's really beneficial about that too is, we all have our unique and different experiences, but at the same time, we also hold universal experiences. So my loss might look different than your loss, but it's still the experience of loss. And that's just one example, of course. So I'm really excited about that. That's on the horizon coming quickly now, hopefully to be recorded this week, depending on technology.
Yeah.
So technology and I have, we could
Mm.
say we have a dance. It was really funny. My husband was on his computer yesterday. He's on his laptop and he's working in my daughter's room because my daughter's been having these nightmares and she doesn't want to be alone. So we're like with her 24/7 right now, one of us, and we're working on that. But so he's in her room doing some work and I come in and I sit down and I'm sitting right next to him and his computer goes out. And he's like, we used to kind of like years ago, I told him, I was like, no, it's a thing. Like, I have a dance with technology, right? And he used to not believe me. He's kind of grown into like really understanding this. So he says,
Mm.
could you move your feet over just a little bit? Could you just move to the side? And then and then I move and his computer starts working again. So,
Mm.
yeah, it's a real wild experience for me trying to be in the technological world. But, all things, coming to fruition and in alignment, then that will be coming out soon, and so I'm excited to share that, and, of course, other things that are happening are we are in the process of hopefully making a decision with publishers for my
Mhm.
book, and hopefully we'll have a publication date soon, which will then, of course, lead to other work and things just being a little bit busy in that regard. So, yeah, I think those are the projects I would say that taking a pause here creates creative space for. And yeah, good place to start and just share that's what's happening over here.
Yeah. And we'll be sure to, link to the first episode and everything of the Purple Couch so people can find it, if you follow our stories and such. One thing that I just want to add about the Purple Couch is when you first told me just in a text, so we didn't talk about it really closely, that you were thinking of orienting it to hold therapists as a primary audience. I was a little bit surprised. And now, though, listening to you talk about it here, like I'm feeling into that so much. And the things that come up for me there are first, I think you said something along these lines, and if you haven't today, I'm sure you have some time or gosh, I feel like I say it to people, but, I feel it's true, like, you can only take someone as deep as you've gone yourself, and I just feel I'm often in the position, I feel like, of trying to help friends find a therapist, and when I do that, I feel like I hope no one takes this personally, but therapists are people too, right?
Mhm,
And so
mhm.
it's no surprise that therapists kind of reflect the cultural predominance to try and just in your own life push away the underworld, right? And so
Right.
um, when I try and help someone find someone, I'm always drawn to try and see who are the depth psychologists in our area because I know of your experience and I know you have gone so deep yourself. And the program you were in, you've talked about how, you couldn't have gone through that program without descending into all of your own everything. And so to me, that's always felt like, well, sure, there are amazing therapists outside of that tradition everywhere that go into their own depths and underworld, but it just always seemed like a note. Maybe it's a little more likely they have. And so I've
Mhm,
always held that. And then also, you told me once that you really identify a lot as a transpersonal psychologist. And so I think that's another layer, right? So it's like depth psychology, I think, already encourages practitioners to go to the underworld, to open into the underworld more.
mhm,
And then you also layer on this other layer, the more spiritual layer. And so I just think that would be really beautiful to bring that perspective to therapists. Like I was just
mhm,
feeling
mhm,
into the rightness of that. And again, even not just for, like teaching this is how, I might teach this or hold this with clients, but again, kind of that question of just more encouragement to help people in these spaces, these healing spaces, just go deeper themselves. And then that in turn helps them,
mhm,
everyone else descend more. So I'm excited to hear the first
mhm.
episode.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you, and that's absolutely the intention that I'm really holding, and I feel really blessed to work with that population of therapists that are really interested in doing that deeper work. It was kind of funny because when I started Sacred Path, I felt very guided intuitively to call it Sacred Path, and I was a little worried. I was like, I hope people don't think of it as like because it's non-religious, right?
Right.
And sacred to me is not the word sacred to me is not a religious word, but of course it's used in many religious
Mhm.
ways and many religions. And so I wasn't sure about it, I wasn't sure like where that might kind of put me, but I decided just to kind of lean in and trust it. And then I also was concerned about, we're very much taught in grad school, and my grad school, as you shared, was very, very different and eccentric and open in ways that most are not. So imagine, 90% of other schools where it's like they don't even touch soul, right? Which
Mhm.
actually is something kind of fascinating and interesting to know is that psychology actually means the study of the soul. It's actually
Hmm.
what it means, which I just love.
So often gets
Yeah.
pushed into just like this mental level.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah. So when I started Sacred Path and really allowed it just to grow and do its thing, it's become such an honor to have so many therapists that want to work
Mhm.
for us. Like, I feel very,
Mhm.
very grateful about that. And it's always really fun to read. I don't get to read them all anymore, but like the cover letters, when somebody applies, I've always asked for a cover letter because you can read a little bit about them and, who they want to be as a therapist or what they are aware of at that point. And it's really cool having people say like, I've had this previous career in other spiritual modalities or other forms of healing or so it's a certain type of person that's really interested in the work anyways. And then of course we have people from traditional schools too that we'll work with that I just have a sense are like more open or curious to stepping into different places themselves too. And yeah, that journey's not easy. And so I appreciate you speaking to it too, that it's like, yeah, like in order to take your clients to the depths in which you may want to, or even to be able to go there yourself, you need to be working with somebody who's done that themselves.
It really is an umbrella beyond therapists too, like
Hmm.
beyond people in healing professions. That is where you're focusing your attention, but it also, you did say this. Okay, so maybe I'm clarifying needlessly, but anyone who is interested in exploring that and they're interested in exploring it through, a more clinical lens. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say through a clinical lens, potentially. I mean, I'm kind of the
Mm,
same as I am everywhere else. So we've talked a
okay.
lot about depth work here, but we haven't necessarily labeled it. So I
Mhm.
would say yes, but one of the things so what's coming through for me right now is I have a Jungian analyst and she said to me just the other day, and I knew this, but it's always very grounding to hear it too. She was like, when we're on these paths of inner transformation, there's these different paths that we go on, right? We have different experiences, different areas in which we're growing in life. And when we go on these paths, there may be, certain archetypal experiences, certain universal experiences, certain, let's say, how would I want to describe it? Like, it's not that everybody's path is the same because it's not, but one of the beliefs of depth psychology is that you can really start to see the map once you understand the labyrinth a little bit. And so
Mm,
she's like, when someone's walking in that labyrinth, right? Or when someone's walking in the dark, it's really helpful to have a guide and somebody helping you understand what it is that you are moving through. So I guess if I try to bring an example to that, I think of like when somebody's healing from a trauma, let's say, and they come into a place where they start to feel angry. That might feel really scary and overwhelming at first. But the truth is that that's part of healing, right? And if you
mhm,
have a guide that's kind of ushering you into walking with you into those darker places or helping you reintegrate a part of yourself that you may have left behind, it's helpful to have not necessarily labels, but like language around what it is that you're doing here in the dark.
mhm,
So, not so much that we want to look at it through a clinical lens, but we do start to kind of create shape around experiences that make people feel a little bit more held
mhm,
and also shapes that help clinicians see how we hold these shapes and we're creating these beautiful murals comes to mind, but well, I'll just keep saying shapes as someone's process continues to transform. So to the untrained eye, it can look like someone's just in total chaos, right? Or
mhm,
total darkness, despair, depression, anxiety, whatever it is. But it's helpful when you start to really understand the shapes, the meaning, and the light that's starting to come through. And once again, bring us back to that ultimate question. Well, what does the soul want? What is this
Mhm.
journey about? What is the soul trying to do? Right? Because the soul didn't come here to work a 9 to 5 job and live in a white picket fence. There's deeper desire, there's deeper meaning for our lives. I mean, I certainly believe that.
I think that the more we open into our intuition, the more we can feel those really subtle, nuanced shapes in everything,
Mhm.
right? And we may not need a guide to narrate the story for us, but I mean, a lot of the time that story isn't felt. And so I feel like that's what you're talking about, like sharing um, this wider lens vision of what story they may be moving through. It can be in like the most intense degree of the pressure cooker of the birth canal, and when you know the story of what is happening there, then you can move with it with so much more grace and, endurance, you know? Um
Mhm, mhm. I feel like one of the most beautiful things too, and what you're talking about, if I come back and give it some labels and language for the intention of just holding it that way. So through writing The Art of Chaos and through the well, not through, but in the integration period afterwards, after writing this book, and I've been integrating around this for over a year now, really. I've actually come up with like this art of integration arc. And what that means is it's kind of like you're saying, like it's like, Joseph Campbell had the hero's journey as far as like a story of like what are the stages that you're going to move through on this
Mhm.
journey, you could say. And so you could hold this as like a developmental stage theory too, just for the sake of language. And one of the things that so many practitioners, therapists, people in the world who are helping others don't bring in is that spiritual component. And so when
Mhm.
you're speaking, I'm like, yeah, you're somebody who's gotten through to the stage of awakening, right? Like, and when you come into that place, you do start to come into consciousness of, patterns in your life or nuances. You start to trust your intuition more. And you're right, at that point, you might not need a guide anymore, you know? I mean, you've always been your best guide, but I think at that
Mhm.
point, you trust your inner guide.
Mhm.
And so I think that while there's still, of course, always, as we've talked about here many times, still unfolding, still work to do, whatever language you want to use, I think I'm really a lot more focused on like getting people there because so much
Mhm.
therapy, so much healing work gets people from a place of, okay, you're suffering, you're in this, place where you've been a victim of circumstances. Now you're surviving. Now you have these tools
Mhm.
to survive your
Uh-huh.
life. Now you can cope. But how do we get people to thrive? How do we get
Mhm.
people to awaken? How do we start to really, you know, awaken that light within them? And not a lot of that is in the theory out there, right?
Mhm.
Like not a lot of that is part of the journey or the work as I call it. So
Would
I'm
you
really excited about that part too.
Yeah. Would you say that, like, your vision for it is to help people to be a guide that helps people reach the place of no longer needing a guide as much? Is that what
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. They say that, this is the one job where you're trying to get your clients to get rid of you or fire you.
Yeah.
Maybe not
Yeah.
fire you, but I mean, it's the one place where you're trying to get your clients out the door.
Okay. Yeah, and, well, I should add when I say that, I'm talking like a guide, like how we're speaking of. I feel
Mhm.
like no
Mhm.
matter what, we're always just intersecting with, the kismet of other people who are constantly lighting things up for us and all of that, so
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
well, I'm excited to hear the first episode, and it sounds like most likely it'll be out in the next, maybe in spring. Does that feel safe
I
to
would
say?
say yes, that feels safe to say.
Well,
Yeah.
very cool. I was thinking about this a little bit yesterday. There's actually so much that I could say that I just feel like the volume is so high that it's not the place. It's not going to work. We've talked about my coming to peace with offering incomplete but authentic pieces of the whole, right, in conversation. But
Mhm.
I just feel like it's so much that I don't think I can even approach a nearness that would feel like it's feeling into the wholeness. So I think I'll have to get into a more detailed update at some point later, whether that's on Voice Note Me or after we come back. There's just so much that I would want to say in all these directions. So I was like, okay, I have to really narrow my focus so that what I talk about can feel like it holds some level of wholeness to me. But
Mhm.
I feel like it's just been a time of just really generally like that birth canal pressure building, 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 and then layered on top of that kind of new levels of things that ask for endurance, but in a way, like so gentle, in a way, like comically absurd and extreme in certain ways, but at the same time, so gentle. And for me to try and explain what I mean by that would take me down like a 10-minute thing. And I'd be again trying to like share all the things, which I don't think I can do right now in this space. But so it's been that energy, but like I really still feel the nearness of a deep turn. And I will say I see physical notes of that emerging too. And I also feel like within the deep pressure, I feel like I feel the meaning of all of it. I think I might touch back to that in a minute, but first I'm going to jump over and just say what I've really been feeling an energetic pull towards is a pull back into my writing,
Mhm.
working on my novel, my screenplay. I think there is this deep calling that I've been realizing through the last year plus of bringing more of what's within, bringing it out into the world and just following that energy. And a lot in the last year was based on voice. And that was what I was meant to follow right there. And I just know there's something calling me into bringing more energy now into my writing.
Mhm.
I feel like there is this deep piece of me that likes to share things in that way, in a very like quiet, thoughtful, solitary way, that lets me reach into like an extreme level of volume and like
Mhm.
and thoughtfully offer a larger piece of that in ways, with a nuance that you can't get to in short pieces here and there. So I feel like I've been feeling a deep call back to my writing. And I saw this quote. I saw you liked it too on Instagram. I wrote it
Mhm.
down because this ties in for me. It's from Michael Mead. And it says, "The world as we know it is already gone. The point now is to inhabit a bigger, unifying, living myth in which the words, 'We are all in this together,' have genuine, heartfelt meaning." And when I saw
Mhm.
that quote, I had already been feeling this pull back again into more of my own creative writing. And then looking at that quote, I felt very much like I meant to write this, like I meant to
Mhm.
bring this sort of unifying living myth into my fiction, my work there, because I believe it, like, so much.
Mhm.
I feel like
Mhm.
I think in our first episode or somewhere along the way, I talked about this imprecise way that I hold kind of like the creation story, the origin story, which I'm not attached
Mhm.
to particulars of at all, but just how I feel it, it's something just along the lines of like the one soul, the divine feminine, divine masculine, the consciousness and the heart fractured into near infinite pieces, and a piece of that being all the souls of all the beings. And what we're all doing, whether it looks like one lifetime or multiple lifetimes, is everything fits in the exact way that it needs to for every single being to know enough love to choose love and be together in love, or if it's multiple lives, for everyone to come into remembering their true self, whether that's a full sacred marriage of all their divine feminine, divine masculine within, or whether, the details of it, I feel like whatever it looks like, I feel that perfection and that wholeness. And I feel it with us as humans, and I feel it with, souls as animals. And whether that looks like whatever we each hold of that one divine soul that is ours, threaded through with our own awareness, free will. You could say that what like a spider might hold is that level that soul holds within the tapestry, or whether, you think that soul currently within a spider will take what it receives in this life, and the nearer it grows into itself, and bring that into, a life as a cat who maybe all through my own imperfect understanding of what level of consciousness different beings hold. I don't wanna say I
Mhm.
know that, but to
Mhm.
me, what I can recognize in an ant is quite different from what I can recognize in, say, a spider, and then, like, a cat or a dog, and a dolphin, and
Mhm.
like a squirrel. Like, I can kind of feel into it differently, and I'm not saying that's the way it is, but in my understanding, and whether that extends, and then with every lifetime coming nearer conscious connection to our true self, that true
Mhm.
piece of God that has always belonged to us. And so I feel like truly, like, we all are in this together, and the
Wow.
fracturing was in this perfect way that allows every single piece of the divine to come back together. And so I've told you, in the
Mhm.
birth canal period I found myself in, where I feel a shift coming, and still just in the pressures. And then we have had ants pop up everywhere, and it's kind of
Mhm.
a funny thing, like, it seems so silly, but the way that I'm moving through that is my
Mhm.
Robin way, and it feels really important. And, we've had mice before, and that was a really big thing for me. And I would catch them in my humane traps and let them out. And then after a stream of it happening, I called someone to come in. It ended up being, putting poison in the crawl space and in the garage. And at that point, I felt like I had to step into, like, my Kali, the destroyer, mother energy. But the fact that I was responsible for killing all of those mice was so heavy for me. I feel like with the ants coming, like, I do not hold an ant like I hold a mouse. Like, I really like, mice are mammals, like, they have emotional
Mhm.
bonds
Mhm.
with their mothers. It's like, I do not, in my understanding, hold that the same way at all, but I still do feel like there's value. They have a right to be here, and they're embedded in this with us too. And so I'm trying to clear them out, without killing them. And in doing so, I do kill them sometimes. I try and gather them
Mhm.
up in tissues, I try and sweep, and that feels fine. But I also feel like it feels really important to me to keep doing it this way, even though over the last month, I probably spent like 2 to 3 hours every day doing these things with ants, where I, like, clear out and I spray with vinegar. And then I try and use essential oils, but only at night after the cats are shut up, because cats, all these things that I would use are toxic to cats. So and it feels so silly to talk about. That's why I said it was like absurd and extreme on the one hand, because it's like I'm already in this birth canal, and now there's this sometimes very overwhelming push of something where I'm spending hours dealing with it every day, and then they pop up, like, in
Mhm.
food cupboards, and then I take care of that, and
Mhm.
then they pop up in a new space where you didn't think, and at a level I've never seen. And my trying to continue approaching it with this way that's really, like, honoring their life force, um, sometimes to the point where it seems like this is never going to end. There's, like, a stream, and, I have thought, do I need to just shift into something that protects our cats and kills them? I've been so overwhelmed a couple points, and then come to, like, no, that's not that's not what I'm meant to do right now. And it feels to me like it is this moment of just really embedding in something I believe in that is like all of this overwhelm, it's so gentle, but it's also like in a daily way, it was very overwhelming. Like very overwhelming, and it went on for a long time. But it feels like how we hold that soul within the ant, even though I see that level of consciousness differently, what that ant is receiving, like it still really matters whether that ant is then
Mm,
bringing that soul into a life then as a squirrel, like whether that consciousness is growing and growing. I just feel like, I mean, everything is so connected. Like the fear that every being feels in this is like part of what we're bringing into everything, and like it really is important to bring love and not bring that fear to like every creature. And so, anyways, that's been the last month. And it really feels to me very much like this moment of endurance.
mhm,
And I
mhm,
will also add, see, I'm bringing in more things than I meant to now, but one big thing that happened for me in the last month and a half, I thought that there'd be a moment that would be like another level of releasing any slight note of fear in my own trust fall or anything, like, because I feel like I've hit different levels that feel like a pretty intense level of, I'm going to say this in quotes, of purity in this space,
mm,
where
mhm,
on every single level. And so, I thought like, okay, here's another one. And then what it ended up being about that I think is so meaningful, it instead was about my releasing the idea that there was another deeper edge I was meant to push myself over, another
mm,
level, and to instead be like, "Oh, no, now," like, it feels to me like that sort of initiation, I feel like it's complete. And now it's just
mm,
being within the space,
mhm,
enduring or whatnot
mhm, mm,
until whatever's meant to shift shifts. But I think it
mhm,
was actually a really important place for me not to, like I expected, release a deeper level and have more sort of energetic, in quotes, purity in the space, but to release the idea that there was any other deeper edge necessarily. Like maybe, maybe not, but to actually realize, oh, it's enough here. Like this is
mhm,
ready. And I meant to hold it with a level of imperfection, if it is even imperfection. Like, I don't know if I would even call it that, but if so, that this is actually like the destined landing place,
mm, mhm,
because I have had like a lot of moments that do feel like really intense in kind of like a part the Red Seas level of trust way,
mhm. Yeah.
I think it's just better for me to hold as a person in the world a sense of not having achieved a perfection, a place of perfection with
Mhm,
it,
mhm,
because I am a human. And so
mhm,
anyways, so that's been bound up too. So I really feel like it's still been in this birth canal pressure cooker, but with a new note of feeling like
mhm.
the really deep intensity of initiation was complete. And now it was just a question of just moving within the space until there was a shift. So that was actually
Yeah.
meaningful. And then the ants to me are just like they're just coming in as like another little note around that, but they really
Mm,
like tie back to that Michael Meade quote for me too, and
mm,
as I'm
mhm.
doing this, I'm like, these ants and these mice, like they belong in my novel, It's so silly. It's like it's a funny thing. Again, it's so gentle, but I just feel like the ants are really reflecting like the deep feeling that I really have that we are all in this together, and we can look at it
Mhm, mhm,
humans too, if you don't want to think about an ant or whatnot. But we're meant to build a world where it's not just about justice. Like, that is really important to have a world where the most horrific things are not just, don't just glide on by and we allow
mhm,
it. That is essential. But I feel like this is the moment in time, like, this is not enough because this still means that all these things are happening. And I feel like this is when you really look at like how interconnected we all are, like people who commit acts that we could describe as evil or just feel so far from any sense of feel like
humanity.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
it's because that's what it is, I feel like they
Mm.
happen from people being so disconnected to their true self, and so how we live as a culture where capitalism is centered and everything's oriented around money and external achievement, so many people fall through the cracks of receiving
Mhm.
love and belonging, at just the level that lets them connect to enough of themselves, that within their imperfection, like all of our imperfection, they're not going to do horrific things to people. And so it's like the way to not have it just be about justice, you know, and I believe like this is what we're going to be doing is rebuild this world in a way where like everyone comes in here as this baby, and like
Mhm.
holding every
Mhm.
single child, like everything centering children, and holding every child in a level of belonging and love. So many people fall through the cracks and like that's what I think we need to just think of holding everyone in this. So anyways,
Yeah.
so my
Yeah.
energy is really moving into my writing. And also, I've been thinking a lot about local community as well. I've been thinking a
Mm.
lot about physical community. I have a friend who did an episode of Voice Note Me with me, Sarah Keck, and she owns a coffee shop. And I've never
Mhm.
seen community building anywhere like I have with their coffee shop. It's so beautiful
Mm.
in the neighborhood, and they just have events all the time. They have a community pantry. I've never seen anything that really builds physical, tangible community like they've done. And I'm just finding myself more drawn to build more community in non digital spaces. Obviously, all the
Yeah.
things that I have been doing over the last year will continue doing in lots of ways or shared digitally. But I just feel like in this moment of time, too, whatever's happening at larger scales, we're supposed to really bring a lot of attention into what is around us that we can touch and build this
Yeah.
community. And I'm just feeling so drawn to do that. And I think we might start a little poetry newsletter that we share at her coffee shop and just different things that really are centered on the immediate physical community right here. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. There's a few notes that I wanna hit, real quickly. Just I mean, you shared so much, and I was just kind of tracking them in this way, not to speak to your
yeah.
experience, but just to share what was coming up for me. You spoke to the still in the birth canal, like still in the space of knowing that birth is coming, but feeling like a real process of transformation has been complete. And I feel like that's energetically worth speaking to. It's certainly something I'm tapped into. It's something I'm seeing my clients tapped into. And I wanted to speak to it because I want to give it language. Kind of going back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. It's like, what if we could take the nuances of these experiences and give it language, sometimes put some shape around it. And the shape for me that I would speak to with that is I think it's a shared experience right now, this feeling of, we've been promised that this is the year of the fire horse, right? And people are like expecting things to like be, everybody, every time the year shifts, people are like, oh, it's a new year. We're in the new year. Everything's going to be like shifting and new. We're ready to birth. And I've noticed a lot of clients feeling like, okay, that's not happening just yet. And yet we do feel the sense of, but the deeper work that I did last year, the deeper transformation that we were all called to, I do agree that there's like this I can speak for myself and others that I've worked with this year so far that feel like there has been a culmination, there has been a completion of transformation process. And what's on the other end is actually quite messy. It's not perfect, right? It's not bad. It's not good. It's, ants in the kitchen and whatever it is for each of us, but you can still feel that energy of what you're saying. Like there has been completion, there has been transformation, and yet we're still kind of also, I think, before the actual birth too.
Mhm, mhm,
So I would just speak to that energetically and say I've definitely been feeling that too, whether it's my fits and starts with visibility and technology and all the things that are being asked to be completed that like aren't working or something's kind of getting in the way. And it can feel like I've kind of described it myself as like, gosh, I feel like I'm in this chaos a little bit, but then I'm like, but I'm really not, because like I guess if my computer's not going to work today, I'll just go home. you
Mhm.
know, like there's still this piece of all the work that I have done to create safety and calm and transformation and peace. And yet there's still things that are just totally messy that just aren't working,
Mhm.
or that are disruptive. And and the other thing that I'll speak to just really quickly is the term I've been really using that I see people really coming into is sacred responsibility. And I've mentioned that here before, but I feel so much of what you're sharing there in that regard, right? Like bringing this awareness to like, look, we're not separate from what's happening, in the Middle East or across the world or with our neighbors, right? Like we are all in this together. And there are so many ways that we can come into consciousness with that. And I do really feel people awakening to that, which I think is really wonderful. And what you're sharing too is, really beautiful to see how that's happening in your community, like in real time. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I
Just
am
see.
really excited to see where these next steps take us. And I know our intention is to circle back to this, whether it's to launch season 2 or just to kind of check in and see where we're at. Um, Robin, I was wondering, I think that something would be kind of neat, and I don't know if we have this. Maybe you could throw it in the show notes, but if we do have people that are listening that have ideas or want to connect with us about anything that they might want to kind of bring into the space with us, or even just want to connect with us, is there a way for people to reach out to us? I know that's never been on the forefront of our minds.
I actually did put something in the show notes, I think the last episode, where I just mentioned, you can always send us a note on Instagram to
Hmm.
Nicole, to me, or to Sacred Conversations. And then I also put down my email for the
Okay.
first time. If anyone wanted, they could email me there. So
Yeah.
if you want, do you want me to put yours in there as well? I can,
Sure.
okay. We'll just include
Sure.
those, so people have a venue if they want to send something.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I am very grateful to you for opening this space with me and for me. This is a portal, especially technologically speaking, that I may not have tapped my toe into without you. So I'm really grateful, and I'm grateful for our time together. And we'll have to find more ways that we get to stay intentionally connected.
Yeah. We'll have to amp
Yeah.
up the voice notes for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a voice note fan.
And equally, Robin and I have really enjoyed seeing people check in with us from all over the world. That's been incredible
Yeah, I
too.
love
So
seeing
thank
their
you for listening. And we
yeah,
would
thank
love, I know
you.
I would love to hear from you. So
I would
yeah.
too. That would be really lovely. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, goodbye for now, and we will
Goodbye
check in
for now.
again later. Yeah. Happy
Okay.
spring.
Happy spring. Thank you for being with us today. If you feel called, follow the podcast wherever you listen and connect with us on Instagram or YouTube at sacred.conversations.podcast. And most of all, may you keep opening to yourself, to the mystery, and to the story within you that's still being written.